How I do?
What's up, you guys? How are you? So,
Pretty impressive.
we went for a walk that turned into a run this afternoon, and we have not looked in the mirror since. We're both like, what is happening
It's
here?
due to our dog, who's a 1-year-old puppy that still wants to play with every dog in the world despite not understanding that there's a 6-foot radius.
And she can't walk in a straight line. So I was like, maybe you should just run. And then Skylar's like, Mommy, you should run. And I'm like, yeah, because I want to push 70, 80 pounds in a stroller. But anyway, we ran, and it was great. So here we are. It's late
Amanda.
again. So
Dean.
yesterday we were like, oh, it's so nice. We go live early, and then life. But anyway, so here we are. How are you guys? We're going to continue on. We decided we're going to call these episodes. It's episode 24 of the Healthy While in Quarantine. Oh yeah, my name's Courtney Miracle. We're supposed to be doing this, you guys. So if you don't know us, you guys know us. But anyway, so it's day 24 of the quarantine, Stay Healthy in Quarantine series, and it is day 4 of talking about nourishment. So if you've been following this week, you kind of know where we're at. If not, and you don't have to see all of them, but if you want to go catch up, you can totally do that. But we really haven't talked a lot about nourishment and food and that kind of stuff. So we got a couple questions, so we're going to address those questions first, and then we're going to shift and we're going to talk about rules and boundaries and why you need to shift those in your life anyway, but why that's really, really important right now and what we're dealing with.
If you haven't seen, so for you guys out there, obviously I think majority of us have gone through some sort of nourishment diet plan or something, or have goals, and we kind of,
My water.
we kind of tend to get frustrated, right? Like I do this thing and I've done it for 30 days and I have results, then all of a sudden I go back to living my normal life, and all of a sudden I go back to what was causing me to be in the place I was in the first place, right? And we constantly have this cycle thing going on there, and we kind of just don't truly understand, and we kind of kick ourselves in the butt and just like, you know what, maybe this isn't for me. If that's the lifestyle I have to live, maybe that just I can't have all my hopes and dreams, and I can't have all that things that I aspire for, but at the same time have actual reality of being able to enjoy my life. So if you didn't watch yesterday's episode, you guys, I highly recommend it for a lot of you guys that may be dealing with or have dealt with some sort of frustration on some sort of nourishment diet, and you have goals and you just constantly feel like you're not able to meet them. It might paint a different picture for you, might give you a little bit more understanding of there's a lot more that goes on that social media in general, the gurus that are trying to sell you the unicorn program aren't going to tell you what is actually going on, just because a lot of people don't really want to let that out, because a lot of it isn't very sexy, but it gives you a lot more understanding of a lot of things that actually are happening internally inside yourself. So with that being said, we actually had a client of ours, we've been reaching out basically bi-daily to all our clients just to kind of see how everyone's doing, right? Like, what's their aspirations, what they're trying to strive for, where their energy level is, where their motivation is, kind of seeing how we can help serve them and how we can help support them with anything that they need. And one of them wrote back kind of this, and she linked it to the conversation I think we had day before yesterday, 2 days ago, that, she was going through her day. Basically, it leads off with, where are you at a scale of 1 to 10? Where's your motivation? Where's your energy? And, she wrote back, before you're watching your video, I was an 8. So I filled this out earlier today. And after watching your talk tonight, I realized I must be a total avoidant person. I try to keep positive. In reality, I was probably more a 6. I was anxious today, and I just tried to keep busy. Not sure if that was an avoidant or channeling that energy toward productivity. I feel better while busy. All right. So with that, you guys, it's understanding that a lot of this stuff that we've been talking about kind of, yet again, everything corresponds and communicates together, right? And so a lot of that stuff is on, addressing what she's talking about, is she was having these anxious feelings. She was having these underlying sensations going on. And so my interpretation of that and kind of discussing on that was, well, I'm gonna replace that feeling with being active, with getting tasks done, setting up my schedule, doing things that is basically going to allow me not to think about the things and the sensations
keeping your mind
going
busy,
on. Yes.
so that you can avoid feeling those feelings.
Good.
Okay, sorry. So, yeah, and so we see this a lot. Like, for so many of us, I mean, we can get into the whole discussion about protectors, which we haven't done yet, but we will. But we all develop when we're young. We develop mechanisms in which, when we don't know how to cope with things because we're too little, we develop what are called protectors, right? And so protectors basically, like, step in, and they're like, okay, well, if that doesn't feel good and we don't know how to deal with that, we're going to do this instead. And I would say, like, 99% of the clients I've met have an avoidance protector in one fashion or another. Children are losing their mind. So in one fashion or another, and that we avoid things, right? So if you've ever been in a scenario where you're like, well, I don't want to worry about that. I don't want to think about that. So I'm just going to go do this, right? Or like, if you're in a place where you're not doing financially amazing and your bills show up, you're like, I'm just not going to avoid those, right? Or you're like, I got all this stuff to do that I don't want to go do. I'm going to go take a nap, or I'm going to go read a book, or I'm going to go get in, like I'm going to drink wine so I don't have to think about it. I'm going to do whatever. Like, there's tons. Brandon, close the door. Sorry, you guys. It's a Barbie meltdown outside. So we realize there's all these protectors that are happening in our life because you've learned basically how to not have to face it, because what happened when you were little, you didn't actually know how to handle the emotion, right? And so then that's just stayed with you. You don't even know you're doing it, right? Protectors are something that we don't even realize are there. So until you shine light on it and you bring awareness to it, like, it's happening for you from your stories and your identities and all that kind of stuff without knowing it. And so we joke about when you have protectors, like, we all need to look at those, because so often our life is run by protectors and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know I was doing that. And then once you see it, you can stop doing it, right? You can shift it. And the thing with avoiders is that with protectors is that we don't want to be like, oh, how do I do that, right? It's like, okay, you get in a relationship with that and you get to understand that it's there to protect you. So we name all of our protectors George. So anytime that stuff shows up, and I definitely have avoidant protectors, and I think Brandon does as well, right? And so for us, we joke about, like, anytime George shows up, we're like, hey, George, I'm so glad you're here. I appreciate you trying to protect me and keep me safe, but I'm actually good, right? And then you allow yourself to, because the thing is, and this is where the beauty of self-development and personal development comes in, is that there's a fine line, and there's a beautiful line between, like, I get to feel this and I get to honor it and I get to bring love to it, whether that's anxiety, worry, stress, whatever that is. We get to bring love into that situation, and we get to feel it, and then we get to move past it, right? We get to let our pain be our teacher, but we don't get stuck in it. And I think that's why so many people avoid certain thoughts and certain feelings, because it's like, well, if I go there, I'm going to stay there, right? Like, I've talked to clients that are literally like, I don't want to talk about what has happened in my past because I'm afraid I'm going to get stuck there. I'm going to get stuck in the depression. I'm going to get stuck in the anxiety. I don't know what to deal with it when I go there, right? And so that's the beauty of, like, working with a coach and having a group of people that you can actually talk about that stuff. But it's the beauty of seeing it, loving it, and not getting stuck in it, not spinning in it, not creating more stories around it, not being there, but feeling it, and then choosing how you want to feel after that, right? Because if you continue to just avoid things, life just keeps throwing them back at you. It's like, oh, here's the lesson again. Still didn't get it. Let me give it to you again. Let me give it to you again. Let me make it worse. Let me make it bigger, until you finally have to look at it. And 99% of the time when you actually look at it and you feel it, it's never bad as you thought it was going to be. And you feel way better just by facing it. Because when you're avoiding something, you have that, like, nagging in your mind, right? Like, I've done this with text messages that I've received that I'm like, oh, I just don't want to respond to that right now. So I just avoid it. I let it be. And then it's just there, like, ticking in my emotions and in my brain. And it's like, God, if I just responded, I could have moved on and been done with the whole thing, right? So we can do a whole thing on protectors. That's not what we're going to talk about tonight, but it's really, really important right now that you guys look at that. Like, are you avoiding things? Are you putting on the happy face and pretending like everything's okay? Because if you are, that's just again another place for growth, and it's nothing that's wrong or bad.
Well, and I think even with that, you guys, it's understanding that it may not be avoiding certain things. Like, I know for me, there were times, like, depending on the scenario, I will use sleep as my protector. I will use avoiding, but I will use also, like, there was times in my life of, like, well, I'm just gonna work, quote unquote, work harder. I would actually create problems for myself to go work on, right? Like when we were dealing with a lot of turmoil and everything surrounding the our business and the gym when it was getting bought by a different, like the building was getting bought by a different corporation, everything, there was a lot of uncertainty there. And so what I would do is I would create certainty by creating a problem with inside the doors of our gym, right? Like I'd create busy work. I would create a project that I had to go work on, right? Like I had to build something, I had to move something, I had to repaint a wall that's been painted all 15 times, right? Like I would create this thing of like, well, no, I'm being productive, but really I'm just recreating a problem to cause myself to shift from the focus of the thing that I don't really want to uncover and look at, right?
Well, and he felt like he was doing something productive by like painting a wall, but that wasn't addressing what was actually happening. Like it wasn't addressing what was actually happening in our life. He was just shifting the attention somewhere else versus actually feeling what was happening, right? And it's funny now looking back, 'cause I used to be like, what do you mean you need to go build another jerk box right now? Like we got all this stuff to do and you're gonna go like do that? And he didn't know, I didn't understand what was happening. And now looking back, it's like, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, and it's understanding yet again, you guys, the biggest thing that you could do for yourself is go back and watch our video on your needs, right? Because we're all trying to meet our needs, right? Like for a lot of you guys in a time of turmoil and everything else, and we're talking, this is going to transition over to rules on there, is how many of you guys are now looking for a nutrition plan to follow? How many of you guys are looking for some strict exercise program to follow? How many of you guys are looking for some sort of structure that you could tie on to yourself in this time of uncertainty, right? Like, what we're trying to do there is you're trying to meet your needs in some fashion, and sometimes by avoiding it could be meeting your need for variety, could be meeting your need for certainty, could be meeting your need for significance, could be meeting your need for all these things. And so it's very important, that's why we understand all these things and how we go about incorporating them into our life, and that way we can shine some light on them.
Yeah, so we talk about rules and boundaries. So this was a really big children, this is why we don't go live at 7:30 tonight. So for me, when I learned about rules and boundaries, I had major ahas. And so basically what it is, you guys, is that we like to create rules in our life, whether we know it or not. We create rules, right? So if we talk about on the nutrition side, strict diets, macros, any kind of like really tight structure is a rule, right? And so the whole thing, and the reason we like rules is because it keeps us safe, right? And so right now in a world where we don't have a lot of certainty, you're like, but if I have a diet, then I feel safe. I feel certain that there's something. And I had someone else actually say this to me today. They're like, I feel like there isn't a lot I can control right now. Go back and watch that when we talk about certainty, that the non-aligned version of that is control. And so right now, a lot of us feel out of control. And it's like, okay, well, if I could just control my food. And I get this, you guys. I did a video on this a couple years ago, and I was like, when life is bad, it's charging my phone. When life is bad, like, focus on the things that you can control, right? And I literally, like, I did a video on that, and it sounded great. What I didn't know is that actually is coming from a wounded place, okay? So rules keep us safe. So if you're in this box, you're like, these are my rules. I feel safe. I know what to do. I can send my focus there, and I know I'm doing something positive. And although you may be doing something positive for your health by actually eating better food, eating more often, doing those things, when the intention is to keep you in a box, it's basically you don't trust yourself. You're feeling out of control somewhere else in your life. You're like latching onto something that's going to try to give you that feeling. Okay. And so the reason rules work, for a while is that because they do keep you safe and it actually feels like a good thing. But eventually, right, the old adage, rules are made to be broken, is that when you have too many rules for too long, you just go off the deep end, right? And this is why we talk about this all the time with our clients. We see the zero, like people are all in or they're all out, right? And so when you have all these rules, you're in this box. I'm gonna do paleo. I'm gonna eat macros. I'm gonna intermittent fast. I'm gonna do, like, you're like, I got all these rules. I'm super safe. And all of a sudden you're like, dear God, I can't keep doing this in my life. And then you're like, F it. I'm gonna go have 19 packages of M&Ms and 6 bottles of wine. I'm going to do that for the next 7 weeks, right? And so the thing about rules is they literally lead. So when we talk about rules with dieting, strict rules that try to keep you safe lead to binging, okay? It might not be binging, like binging and throwing up, but like it will lead you to overeat in some fashion eventually, right? And so rules are not, although they feel like they're going to keep you safe, it's not at all what you need to do, because it just means you don't trust yourself. And you're trying to meet your need for certainty in a way that probably isn't serving you.
Well, and with that, you guys, it's not, and we're not saying like certain methodologies and certain things aren't bad, right? Like it's good to collect data for yourself
structure.
so you can understand, right? Like we're no longer like, trust us, like we've done macros, we've done paleo, we've done zone, we've done a lot of different things where you have to weigh and measure your food and do all these kind of things for it, right? And like we're big advocates of like the more data we can collect, it gives us direction of what's working and what's not working, right? Like it's no different than any other aspect of our life. When we have data, we know what direction we can go in. And awareness. But the problem, what we see there is, first off, what I always like to ask everyone is, what is your relationship with food? What is your relationship to dieting, right? Like what is the purpose that you eat food for, right? Like, and for most of them, from my experience, for I would say 90% of people, they get kind of that like awestruck look, like, I don't know, I just eat food because that's what I've been told to do since the time I could remember, right? And or we get the same sense of like, well, food either makes me skinny or fat. Food either makes me healthy or not healthy, right? But there's a lot of different balls that we can juggle of the reasons why we eat food, right?
Or people that think they have to have the right answer. Well, it's fuel. And I'm like, do you believe that? No, right? It's just fuel. That's the only reason.
Well,
right?
if it was just fuel, why would you crush 13 beers and have pizza, right? Like, if it was just fuel, you'd look at that as like basically like throwing sugar in your gas tank as opposed to giving yourself high octane food. And it's not saying there's right or wrong to that. It's just, yet again, what is your intention behind there? Like for what Courtney was just talking about, I think the big takeaway that's important there is your intention. Right? Like you can end up in the same destination, right? Like you can get the same results, right? Like you can end up on the podium, you can make $1 million, you can be the greatest parent in the world, but what is your intention of your course to get there? Right? Like if you're shackled up by rules and you're shackled up by basically nothing's good enough and I have to do this for an external reason and all these things that are going on through there, you may arrive at that destination of what you want to accomplish. But I promise by the time you get there, you're going to be so just inundated with all the rules and restrictions and weighed down by all the things. Getting there isn't going to even mean anything to you because it's not what you get in life. It's what you become along the way. And so if you can allow yourself to understand that you can flow, you can be like water, right? Like you can expand, you can shrink, you can do all these kind of things and understand why you're doing it and come from a place of inspired action and not coming from a place of I have to control or I have to avoid or I have to restrict myself from these aspects that are holding me back. Because my other question I like to follow is, okay, so you need this restricted plan now, right? Like you need to fill out every single thing as you go. And maybe right now you might need that for your data points. But at the same time, if you need this amount of structure right now and you are married to this structure, what's going to happen if a scenario like this comes up again or your life changes, right? Like all of a sudden we have 2 kids. I know my lifestyle has changed and my eating habits have changed than what they were when I was 27 years old and I had all free times and I was able to exercise a lot more and do other things, right? But if I was married to the way that I did things when I was 27, I would probably continue to have that thing of, well, I did this once upon a time, I can do it again, but I'm going to be pissed off at myself because the reality is I can't do that anymore.
Well, and I think so obviously that's rules, right? And again, what we need to create is healthy structure in boundaries, right? And so I think a lot of times people hear boundaries and like, you need to have boundaries in relationships, you need to whatever, but like you need to have boundaries in your life. And I think when it comes to food and your relationship with food and with your body, boundaries are beautiful because you get to say, okay, what is again, my favorite question, what does the most nourished version of me feel like? And what actions do I take to get there, right? And so I have enough data because I've tracked on really unhealthy and very healthy ways for a very long time. Like I know if I eat 4 meals a day, if I have XYZ, right? I know what makes me feel good. So in my body, and it was, I'm not gonna lie, it was hard for me to go from rules to boundaries. Like I had to go from rules to nothing to boundaries because otherwise I was like, I'm like spiritually bypassing, I'm just renaming my rule a boundary. But so what we want to think about with boundaries, so if rules are a box and they keep you stuck, like Brandon said, boundaries are flowy, right? And so you're like, okay, well, I probably need to eat 3 or 4 times a day. Most of my meals should have a vegetable, a protein, and whatever, right? And so like you have a little bit of structure, but you can't fail, right? And so it's not like I eat 20 grams of carbs and 20 grams of protein and 5 grams of fat at 10 o'clock every single day, no matter what, right? Those are rules. So if you're like, okay, well, most of my meals have 20 to 25 grams of protein, they have 20 to 25 grams of carbs, I have, 2 cups of veggies, and I have a little bit of fat, right? Like that's a boundary. And if you don't hit it and say at one meal you missed something, right? You didn't fail it, right? It's just data. And then you can start to see like, okay, these are the boundaries. When I did this, how did I feel? Did it work in my life? Like, does this make sense? And so if you miss stuff, you're like, okay, well, how do I need that to mold that so that it actually works, or what can I shift, right? And that's our big thing with shifting, right? So if you're like, well, the last couple of days I've been trying to we always have morning smoothies. And I've been trying to have my smoothie while I coach at 5:15. I get up at 3:45, coach at 5:15, and has not gone well. I'm trying to get half of it in. I get like a quarter of it in. So it's not to say that's a bad thing for me to try to do, but I get to say, okay, well, how do I shift this so that maybe I can actually get it done in my life, right? And the cool thing with boundaries is you cannot fail. So there's no start, there's no stop. It's not like, well, I started today, I got 4 days in and I quit, right? You just don't have that feeling.
So when you were going through your kind of height of measuring, weighing, all that kind of stuff, when you either were under or over, or you just on Saturdays, obviously, because we always live by the old adage, like Saturdays are like your cheat
free
day, right? Yeah. Like their free day, right? So when you would go through that and you had a day where you didn't hit your numbers, what was your initial response to that?
So initially, because I came from disordered eating and under eating, I thought it was a good thing. So when I didn't hit my numbers in the beginning, I was like, oh, I'm under. That's a great thing. And we've seen that with a lot of our clients. But I realized for me that when we talk about the external thing creating an internal feeling, when I stopped counting and when I started to actually get healthy and realize what was going on, I realized that I had already made up in my mind what the scale was going to say the next day and what I was going to look like. And so if I was over, or we had a cheat day, or I had a glass of wine, or I had 2 bites of chocolate, I knew in my head when I looked in the mirror the next day I was going to be fat. And I would create that.
Well, did you have a preconceived notion of what the scale was going to say before you even stepped on it?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. Like, I knew what I looked like. I knew what the scale was going to say. I didn't know those things. But in my head, I had this preconceived notion that, like, if I did that, I must look like this, right? And so the truth of the matter was I actually could never see myself for what I was, because I was letting my macros, which were my need for certainty, completely dictate that, right? And so if I would hit my numbers, and we were both like we got to the point where it was like, I'm going to have a half a cashew to hit this number. Like, oh, yeah. I mean, it was literally like, and we drilled it in, like, whatever you have to do to hit your number, because your body needs consistency. And there is some truth to that on the science side of your body, but what it does to your mindset is not so good, right? And so I would go to bed and be like, I hit my numbers, I'm going to be skinny. I hit my numbers, I'm going to be skinny. I hit my numbers, I'm going to be like, whatever. Like, that's what I was searching for, even though I didn't really want that. So I always thought I knew what was coming based on how I did or didn't do when it came to counting my macros, which was very disordered and very unhealthy.
So in addition to that, so when you went over, what was your also response to that?
I was a terrible person. My self-worth, everything was based around my macros and then what it would look like. And if I didn't look a certain way, I didn't feel like I was actually worthy of your love, attention. I felt like a failure. And my subconscious would always like flash back to, well, if I overate yesterday, I better make up for those calories today and eat less today, or work out more, or exercise harder, or burn it off. But I felt like a failure because I didn't hit my numbers and I went over.
So I mean, obviously I've known you forever. I'm like, know your story on there, but I think, that story, I would imagine, probably rings true for so many, right? Like, I know that rings true for me on the side of what I would do on the side of, like, I go to the gym, like, I need to punish myself today. Like, literally, I would tell myself, I need to punish myself. I need to go and do a crazy hard workout because I need to punish myself for my actions or what's going on or whatever I'm feeling, right? And so I think...
Well, Brandon would make up workouts. right? Like when we talk about like he sort of had disordered exercise because he was being competitive, and if he missed Mondays, he'd make it up on Tuesday or make it up on Wednesday, or he'd be like 2 days behind and he'd be working out for 4 hours to make up what he missed, because like on his training protocol, which was like strict macros, his training protocol was rules, and like if you missed it, you had to make it up, and you had to make it up or your self-worth was
because it was fear, right? Like we see that with a lot of our clients that start off with us with like, well, I missed on Tuesday, well, should I just double up for today? And it's like, well, no, Tuesday's gone. Like you're moving your body, right? Like it, and that took me a long process to get through of understanding that more isn't always better. Strict isn't always better, right? Like it may be like these rules may be good, but what's it doing on a psychological level? What's it doing on an emotional level, right? Because we talked about that last night. If your internal environment isn't lining up with your external environment, you can do all the macro counting, you can do all the calorie counting, you can do all the keto, you can do all the fasting, you can do all these things you want, but if you're having confliction between your external and your internal, it's not going to add up to the best results of what you want. Not to mention if you're having psychological, emotional, and mental things going on there, it's not going to be sustainable. And I think after doing this, for 20 years with people, like our big goal is not only to help people reach their goals, but also to allow them to experience this for the duration of their life. Right? Like, what would that feel like for you to not just feel like you can aspire to accomplish the things you can do, but at the same time feel like there's no possibility that you can fail? Right? Like, not to say that you're not going to fall down, not to say that there's not going to be obstacles, not to say that there's going to be roadblocks in the way, but at the same time, not feeling like if you walk out and you got a flat tire, you don't have to sabotage and flatten the rest of your tires that are on your car, right? Like, being able to learn, be able to grow, and be able to aspire to the thing that you ultimately want to become without feeling like you're the worst human being because you didn't meet your daily need of what was written on your program.
Yeah, and I mean, to be honest, you guys, if this stuff is ringing true, like, so we talked about my eating disorder and my disordered eating. If this is ringing true, if you've been on and off the diet cycle, you have disordered eating habits. I'm not saying you have an eating disorder, but you have disordered habits with food and with your relationship with your body, right? And so if you have that, I would just encourage you, because I know what it feels like to be in that, to take some steps. Reach out to me. I have a self-led program. I'd love to coach you through this, but just like find help. If with me, with somebody else, like it is a terrible feeling. It's a terrible way to live your life. It is not serving you. And I promise you right now, it might feel like structure and it might feel safe, but like the other side of that, you guys, is freedom and lightness and joy and ease and like all of those things that you probably think you're searching for. And the physical body that you want, right? Because for so many people, you guys, physical weight is a representation of emotional weight. So you have to fix the inside before you're going to fix the outside.
So external and internal.
You just do, right? And so, like, if this is ringing true, if this triggers you, if you're like, whatever, she's crazy, but like your body's like, oh, that's me, right? Like, reach out, because there's a way to get through this. Like, literally, the self-led program, it's 6 weeks. It'll help you recreate your relationship with food. It will help you understand the internal and the external, and like recreate a relationship with food, one that feels good and easy and flowy. And like, that is honestly my mission for you guys, because I did it for so long and I know how bad it feels. So if you have questions, if you want to talk to somebody, like, just reach out to us, because this is your time, right? This is your time to say, you know what, in this moment, when life was crazy, I stepped up for myself. I showed up for myself, and I decided to do something different that I've never done. Maybe it feels scary. I was scared to death when I started my program, but that's your body giving you that clue that, like, when there's resistance, that's actually the thing that you need to do.
Well, and not to mention, you guys, I know, and Courtney could talk on this more. We won't take a lot more of your time, but when you were in your height of restriction, did you see that come up in other areas of your life?
Oh, yeah. Oh, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, I obviously, I know that answer. Like, we talked about it before. Like, when we were in the height of restriction, we were also restricting on money. We were restricting on our relationship. We were restricting on so many other areas, because it was just it was a metaphor for all these other areas that we were doing.
And it was an energy, right? It was an energy of lack, because dieting and it's in rules, and like, that's an energy of lack. It's not abundance. And like, we joke about that. I was like, I literally couldn't have more than one one cashew. Like, how do you think you're going to show up and build a profitable business when you're living in an energy of lack and can't and shouldn't and whatever? You're not going to turn around and create that in your life. And so, like, I was in this like cycle of just spinning and the energy was awful. It felt terrible. And so there was no other amazing things happening in our world because, like Brandon said, it was a metaphor for that. And so he was doing it in the gym and I was doing it in the kitchen, right? And like the intentions were both good, but when I was going to the gym, it wasn't coming from a bad place. And when he was eating perfect macros, it wasn't coming from a bad place. But we both were definitely not in a healthy relationship with ourselves and with what was going on in our life. And I've seen my cycle go. Like, when all the times in my life where I felt like I didn't have control is exactly when my bulimia would show back up, right? Because I had control of something. And not to be too graphic, but like throwing up is a visceral release. And so there was actually some like healing happening in that because I didn't know how else to feel my feelings. That's a whole nother topic. But yeah, we love you guys. Obviously, we're super passionate about this stuff. Like, I mean, I know for me, this has changed everything in my world, and I would love for it to change that in your world if that's something that you're dealing with, or if there's somebody that you know and you love, and it's hard to watch them go through this, because I know for him it was not cool. So we love you guys. We appreciate you guys. We'll see you guys tomorrow for episode 25. Let us know what questions you have about nourishment, and we'll talk to you then.
Thanks, y'all.